The forest has always fascinated me. It's beautiful and serene, but it's also a place that demands respect, full of mystery and unpredictability. I've always loved solo camping trips. There's something magical about escaping the city noise and finding peace in the middle of nowhere. Last weekend, I decided to take my SUV and spend a night deep in the woods. The air was crisp, and the stars above sparkled like they'd been sprinkled by hand across the sky. I found a small clearing, parked, and set up a simple camp. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I lit a small fire and cooked myself a basic dinner. The forest came alive around me, filled with the steady chirp of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. It was calming in a way that made me feel completely at ease. After dinner, I sat by the fire for a while, staring into the flames. There's a kind of magic in that solitude, just you, the fire, and the forest around you. By midnight, I was feeling sleepy, so I doused the fire and climbed into the back of my SUV, which I'd outfitted into a cozy little sleeping space. My pillows and sleeping bag were set up just right, and the cracked windows let in the cool night air. It felt safe, snug, and perfect for a good night's rest. I was just drifting off when I heard something. At first, it was so faint I thought I'd imagined it, a distant, rhythmic sound like chanting. My heart skipped a beat. I strained to listen. The sound was haunting, like a soft, eerie melody carried by the wind. A shiver ran through me. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just animals or some weird echo through the trees. But the chanting grew louder. It wasn't coming from far away anymore. It sounded closer, like it was moving through the forest. I sat up, peering out the window, but the night was pitch black. The moonlight barely broke through the dense trees, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and sway. My pulse quickened. I'd never heard anything like it, and my instincts screamed that something wasn't right. I debated whether to stay or leave. Part of me wanted to grab the keys and peel out of there, but another part insisted I was overreacting. Then, as quickly as it had started, the chanting stopped. The forest fell silent again, almost unnaturally so. I took a shaky breath, convincing myself it was just some strange local ritual or an odd trick of the wind. I locked the doors, lay back down, and closed my eyes, though sleep didn't come easily. Eventually, exhaustion won, and I drifted off. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke up with a start to the sound of loud knocking on my window. My eyes flew open, and my heart felt like it stopped. Slowly, I turned my head, and my breath caught in my throat. There was a face staring in at me. It was a man, wild-eyed, disheveled, and too close for comfort. His hair stuck out in uneven tufts, and his expression was a mix of desperation and something darker. Panic surged through me, and I let out a scream so loud it startled even me. The man flinched, stepping back into the shadows, and then he bolted, disappearing into the woods without a word. My hands were shaking as I scrambled to turn on the SUV's lights. The clearing was empty now, but the fear didn't leave. I sat there, clutching my knees to my chest, too terrified to move or close my eyes again. I kept the headlights on and stayed hyper-alert, jumping at every sound. Each rustle of leaves sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I silently begged for the night to end. When the first rays of sunlight finally filtered through the trees, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Without hesitation, I started the car and drove away, the events of the night replaying over and over in my head. I reached a small diner in the next town and stopped for a hot meal, hoping it would calm my nerves. As I sat there, the waitress must have noticed how shaken I was. She came over and asked if I was okay. I hesitated, but then I told her everything about the chanting, the man, and the sleepless night. Her face grew serious, and she leaned in closer. "You're not the first person to say something like that," she said, her voice low. "There are stories about those woods. People talk about strange figures chanting, and other things they can't explain. Some say it's haunted. Others think it's something darker." Her words sent chills down my spine. I finished my meal quickly, thanked her, and got back in my car. As I drove, I couldn't shake the image of that man's face or the haunting melody of the chanting. Who was he? Why was he out there in the dead of night? And what was that sound? I'll probably never know, and honestly, I don't think I want to. But one thing is for sure. I'm done camping alone in the woods. Some places hold secrets that are better left undiscovered, and some mysteries are safer to avoid entirely. During my college winter break, I made the choice to spend some time with my cousins out in North Dakota. They lived in a small, quiet town blanketed in snow, far removed from the chaos of campus life. I figured it would be a nice, peaceful escape. Little did I know, I was walking straight into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. One evening, my cousins and I decided to visit a friend's place. The house was way out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by thick woods that stretched as far as you could see. It was the kind of area where silence seemed louder than any noise. We had a great time, laughing, swapping stories, and completely losing track of time. But as the night wore on, I started feeling tired and told my cousins I'd head back home. "You sure?" one of them asked. They wanted to stay a bit longer, but I shrugged it off. "Yeah, I'll be fine. It's just a short walk," I assured them, pulling on my heavy coat and gloves. The shortcut through the forest wasn't new to me. I'd taken it plenty of times before. The crunch of snow under my boots was the only sound as I walked. My breath fogged the air, and the cold nipped at my face, but I didn't mind. The forest trail was familiar, and taking it shaved about 10 minutes off the road trip back. As I got deeper into the woods, though, something felt different. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches blocking out the moonlight. The air felt heavier. Then I saw it, a figure standing further down the path. My stomach sank. I hadn't expected to run into anyone out here, especially this late. The person was tall, wearing a dark coat, and as I got closer, I noticed a ski mask covering their face. Only their eyes were visible, and they were locked on me. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound casual as I waved, but the person didn't move, didn't respond. They just stood there, staring. A chill ran down my spine, and every instinct told me something was off. My pulse quickened, and I debated turning back. But I was already halfway home, and going back felt like giving in to my fear. Keeping my head down, I hurried past him, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel his gaze burning into me, but I didn't look back. The moment I passed him, I picked up my pace, almost running. Then I heard it. Footsteps. They were behind me, growing louder with every step. My blood ran cold, and I knew he was following me. I didn't dare turn around. Instead, I broke into a full sprint, the cold air cutting into my lungs as I pushed my legs to move faster. His footsteps matched my pace, closing in. Up ahead, I spotted the faint glow of the lights from my cousin's house. Adrenaline surged through me, and I ran like my life depended on it. The only thing in my mind was getting to the house before he reached me. When I finally burst out of the forest and into the yard, the footsteps stopped. Breathless, I spun around, but the path was empty. The trees stood still, and the shadows revealed nothing. I pounded on the door until one of my cousins opened it, his face immediately shifting to concern when he saw mine. "What's wrong?" he asked. "There was someone in the forest," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. He followed me. Without hesitation, my cousins grabbed flashlights and checked outside, but they didn't find a single trace of anyone. They told me it was probably just another person walking home, but I couldn't shake the eerie feeling. That night, I barely slept. Every noise sent me into a panic, and I couldn't stop seeing the man's cold, empty eyes. The next morning, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't taking that path again. Ever. The memory of that night haunted me for the rest of my stay. Even now, thinking about it gives me chills. Who was that man? What was he doing out there? And why did he follow me? I'll never know. But I'm sure of one thing. I'm never walking alone through a forest at night again. What should have been a relaxing winter break turned into a nightmare. And now, that quiet little town in North Dakota will forever be tied to a terrifying memory I can't shake. What started as a simple mushroom foraging trip with my best friend Emily turned into the most chilling experience of my life. Growing up in our sleepy town, the forest on its outskirts had always been the stuff of whispered legends, wild tales of vanishing hikers, ghostly figures, and strange noises after dark. We never paid the stories much mind. To us, it was just a lush, untamed stretch of wilderness, perfect for exploring. What started as a simple mushroom foraging trip with my best friend Emily turned into the most chilling experience of my life. Growing up in our sleepy town, the forest on its outskirts had always been the stuff of whispered legends, wild tales of vanishing hikers, ghostly figures, and strange noises after dark. We never paid the stories much mind. To us, it was just a lush, untamed stretch of wilderness, perfect for exploring. As we ventured further in, the forest seemed to come alive. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp wood, and the rustling of leaves created a soothing rhythm. Emily walked ahead, flipping through the book and calling out the names of fungi she recognized, her voice cutting through the stillness. I lagged behind, marveling at the dappled light dancing on the forest floor. Hours passed in what felt like moments. We stumbled on patches of mushrooms, some edible, others ominously toxic-looking, and filled our baskets while joking about opening a gourmet restaurant. Then Emily spotted it. A massive patch of what she swore were golden chanterelles, glistening like treasure in the underbrush. Only one problem. It was way off the trail. "Lila, you've got to see this," she called, her voice echoing. I hesitated, glancing back toward the faint dirt path we'd been following. "Shouldn't we stick to the trail?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "Oh, come on," she teased, already moving toward the mushrooms. "We'll be fine. Just mark the spot on your phone." Reluctantly, I followed her. The deeper we went, the darker and denser the forest became. The mist thickened, clinging to our clothes like cobwebs. The air felt colder, heavier, as though the trees themselves were leaning in to watch us. When I glanced at my phone to check the time, I froze. No signal. "Emily, I really think we should head back now," I said, my voice a little shaky. She looked up from her treasure trove of mushrooms, her smile fading as she noticed how dim the forest had become. "Yeah, okay," she said, brushing off her hands. "Let's go." But as we turned around, the realization hit us hard. We had no idea where back was. Every direction looked the same. Twisted tree trunks, gnarled branches, and thick undergrowth that seemed to stretch on forever. "Let's retrace our steps," Emily said, trying to sound confident, but her voice cracked just a little. We started walking, calling out every so often in case someone might hear us. The forest swallowed our voices whole. No echoes, no responses, just an oppressive, suffocating quiet. The daylight faded faster than it should have, as though the forest itself was swallowing the sun. By the time we realized we were completely lost, it was almost pitch black. I switched on my phone's flashlight, the pale beam barely cutting through the darkness. And that's when I noticed the silence. Not just the absence of sound. It was more like the presence of something, an almost tangible void pressing down on us. No birds, no crickets, no rustling leaves, just the crunch of our footsteps and the sound of our breathing. "Do you hear that?" Emily whispered suddenly. I nodded, my heart pounding. There was a faint sound in the distance, a rhythmic crunch like footsteps. At first I tried to convince myself it was just an echo of our own steps. But as it grew louder, it became clear. Someone or something was following us. "Who's there?" Emily called out, her voice trembling. No response, just the steady crunch of leaves behind us. Then we saw it. A figure, impossibly tall and unnaturally still, standing between the trees. Its silhouette was barely visible in the dim light, but its posture was wrong. It stood too straight, too rigid, with its head cocked at an unsettling angle. "We have to go," I whispered, gripping Emily's arm. We backed away slowly, keeping our eyes on the figure. It didn't move, not at first, but as we turned to run, it lunged forward with an inhuman speed. We bolted, tearing through the forest with no regard for direction. Branches snagged at our clothes and clawed at our skin. My phone slipped from my hand, its light vanishing into the underbrush. "Emily!" I screamed, reaching for her. Her hand found mine, and we ran blindly, guided only by the sheer need to escape. Suddenly, the forest opened up into a clearing. In the middle stood an old cabin, its roof sagging and walls warped with age. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, but it was the only shelter in sight. We stumbled inside, slamming the door behind us and shoving a broken table against it. The cabin reeked of mildew and decay, but it felt safer than the forest. For a moment, there was silence, blessed silence. Then the banging started. It wasn't a knock. It was violent, frantic, shaking the door and the walls. Emily grabbed a rusted iron poker from the fireplace, and I armed myself with a jagged piece of wood. "Do you think it's still out there?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding. Before I could answer, the noise stopped. We stayed frozen, straining to hear anything, footsteps, breathing, anything. But the silence was complete. By the time dawn broke, the forest outside looked almost peaceful. We cautiously opened the door, half expecting to see the figure waiting for us, but the clearing was empty. We didn't speak as we made our way back to town. Somehow we found the trail, though I don't remember how. Emily finally broke the silence as we reached the edge of the forest. "What do you think it was?" I shook my head, unable to answer. Even now I don't know, but I do know this. I'll never set foot in that forest again. Some secrets are better left hidden. If you like these stories, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to listen to new stories from Mr. Fear every day. Thank you for watching.